Okay, I had a strange message about accepting my own institution's policy on recording things. I've accepted it, and welcome to our 74th Reading Online Sport Economics Seminar. It is a great pleasure to have Arne Feddersen from the University of Southern Denmark presenting this afternoon, a third talk in the last few weeks on basketball, which I'm very much looking forward to. A few things first in terms of administration. I want to repeat the share from last week of the two calls for papers of HIHON conferences coming up in the next few weeks. So I'll just quickly share those. Let's just go with the screen. And so we have, first of all, a more pressing deadline, the fifth HIHON conference on the economics of leisure, culture and sport, which is taking place next month, 26th, 27th of November. And it's specifically aimed at early career researchers or graduate students. So if you're within 5 years of your PhD or doing a PhD, please do consider submitting an abstract 800 words to email to Placido Rodriguez in HIHON, and said the deadline is tomorrow, so please do check that one out. And then we have another HIHON conference, hopefully. Both of them are hopefully in person. And the second one is the 15th HIHON conference on sport economics, Roger Knoll and Peter Sloan golden anniversary, just before Christmas, the 17th, 18th of December. And a similar thing, send an abstract, 200 words, this time to Placido at the email addresses in the call for papers. A bit more time for that one, November the 20th, for a conference in December. And while we're still meeting online and in person, I'm quite happy to share information about conferences that are coming up and other things that are taking place. So please do let me know if you have any. The only other administrative note is that this Sunday, the UK will go back to GMT or UTC. And so if you're joining us from North America, please do take care of the time when you join us next week. But without any further delay, I would like to invite Arne to take over with his talk, which is entitled "Is Being Slightly Behind at Halftime Good? Loss Aversion and Diminishing Sensitivity in Professional Team Sports." All yours, Arne.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, James, for the invitation, and thanks for organizing this. I think that's great. I have not had the time to join live, but I watched a couple of the presentations on YouTube. First of all, thanks for this. Then I think maybe just a whatever funny anecdote about the shift of the summer to the winter time. So as a broad addict to sports, of course, I'm also watching quite some American football. And so I think the next weekend is the perfect weekend in Central Europe, because then the games will not start at 7 p.m. but at 6 p.m. And so, which means that the second game, which will start, will not end at roughly 2:30, but 1:30. So that maybe would be or will be nice. I'm pretty sure the NFL will not change the schedule because of me and a few other Europeans, but at least for this 1 week in the season, that's kind of nice. Okay, so then I will share the presentation. Okay, if I can trust the red frame, then you should see my slides now.
Yeah, we've got them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so welcome to this presentation. It's actually not just only about basketball. So in this sense, it fits quite well into, as you said, the last couple of presentation weeks. However, it is also partly about handball or team handball, which in this sense, like I just heard that there are some people who really are proponing for research on basketball, and I'm a big fan of team handball. Played handball since I'm was roughly 6 years old, and even my relationship and my thankfulness to the sport of handball goes beyond this, because my parents met playing handball. So probably without the sport, I would not be sitting here. However, beyond that, I think it is a great sport, and so fast action, a lot of scoring, some physical components. So. Yeah, I can just highly recommend watching some team handball. But of course, also basketball is a part of this talk. And so, yeah, so what's the basic outline is roughly more or less the same as for most of the empirical studies. So I will give a short introduction and then a little bit of a very, very short literature review, talk a little bit about the motivation and the background of the study, talk about the empirical strategy and of course the results, and then I will conclude and give a short outlook to what might be on the list for the future within this area. And so the literature, and I'm pretty sure that many in this audience know about these people. So for example, I know, Alex, that you're quite happy if I start talking about tournament theory, and that I remember that you have really advocated that I should teach more tournament theory in the program. So I think we all know the basic background to this, that non-linear incentives will increase the efforts of people. Then, of course, there's the question, of course. So if I'm too far behind the leader, or too far behind reaching the next level of the payouts, then of course that might actually discourage me as a person. And of course, there's this probably classical example of the whatever car salesman in a moment where this person might not have the ability to reach the next bonus because the competition is too far ahead. Then this person might just kind of stop the efforts, the extra efforts, which of course the employer would like to get. And so if we look at this, and then we can talk about the first, and to some extent maybe it's an assumption. So that if we at least assume that scoring a goal or reaching a goal, first of all, requires the same amount of effort whether a person is ahead of the competition or behind the goal, ahead of the goal or behind of the goal. And then if we translate this to sports, we can, at least for the moment, talk about that scoring in sports might also require the same amount of effort, whether I'm ahead or behind. I will, when I will introduce the two sports where I look at here, then we might talk a little bit about whether this is a good assumption or not. And then, of course, we know that that goals which people are setting can act as a reference point, and so that, of course, the position relative to the goal can influence the motivation in a manner which is consistent with prospect theory. So that we have the goal as the reference point, that people might have loss aversion, and the farther I'm away from that goal, diminishing sensitivity will kick in. And yeah, so very quickly, so loss aversion, again, I don't want to be boring, because most of us know this, and some have actually also done behavioral economics research. So people who are behind the goal by a similar amount will work harder than people who are above their goal. And as I just said, people who are slightly below their goals should work harder than those who are further away from it. Another aspect which is very central to this study is that feedback to employees, for example, will help to adjust their efforts to meet the goals. And this is in a way the story I want to look into in this study. It is in a way quite directly built up on the initial paper from Berger and Pope, who analyzed the effects of halftime and full-time results of around about 18,000 NBA games and more than 30,000 NCAA basketball games, and then they have some laboratory experiments in that study too. And so, as far as I know, this has been for quite some time the only study in this area, and then just recently a group of authors was also with respect to the universities, but I guess also was a Dutch background, have analyzed the same kind of setup within Australian football, American football, rugby, and also basketball. So typo, as I can see here. And yeah, so the basic idea is, or maybe we can come back to the feedback later on. So this study also fulfills one of a kind of a central a central aspect I see, where, of course, social sciences and economics in general, but of course also we as sports economists, I think, should focus on, or put some focus on, and that's actually replication studies. Also, again, I don't want to bore people too much. I'm pretty sure that we all are aware of replication studies and what the value of this for the scientific community, for academic progress, but of course also for reliability of policy recommendations and so on are. And of course, it's not always easy to find the right amount of this, because and I know that was a couple of people when we talk in former times when we talked at coffee breaks at conferences, I guess that we could easily say that within the sports economics community we do have these maybe mean, like, so the whatever competitive balance, the case of the whatever third division in Botswana. And again, I don't want to offend anyone living in Botswana, but of course that's not what I'm talking about. I think there is a point, a saturation point, of course, where we maybe have enough evidence, and where there is just, of course, a diminishing need for other studies. However, I think there are a couple of very central studies where I have the feeling that they are cited quite regularly, and we all know that, especially in social sciences, of course, the context of a study plays an important role with respect to what the results are. And again, I'm generally, I think, a very positive person, so I'm not thinking about that people have fine-tuned, rigged their results, which of course we know that this has happened. but I'm really also thinking about, okay, it is the context which matter. Yeah, and so if we go back to this period when the Berger and Pope paper was more or less the only paper in this area, that of course, if this then is cited and used as, of course, as a base and a justification to other research, then we still have to say, okay, let's just be careful here, because it's just one study and one setup. And even if they have done everything in a very reliable way, it might still be the case that we would need more evidence, and especially evidence from different contexts. And this is, for example, something which one of my other research areas, the economic impact of sporting events and sport facilities. I think there we have kind of a similar thing to look at. One is that maybe sometimes, or I guess at a point, people got a little bit bored about either conducting those studies and then reading those studies. But I'm still not really sure that that we have reached a level where we have enough information about those different contexts and where we are in a situation to give better policy implications. And so this is, first of all, a motivation and to some extent a justification for this study. But I would also like to see this as a call for replication studies within sports economics, within areas where we actually do not have much of a saturation with respect to the evidence. Yeah, so I hope that that I can raise some awareness to this. I know from talks to quite some colleagues, and also if I remember Bernd's keynote speech from the EASY conference this summer, I think he also mentioned something in a similar direction. Okay, so if I look at the two papers which exist, and of course my own approach, then the original Berger and Pope study focuses on NBA basketball and college basketball. Slightly different setups, of course, because the rules are slightly different, especially with respect to the structure, and that's what we will come to in just a minute. But quarters in NBA and half times in NCAA basketball. And then looking at the paper from, I will now just call them the Dutch colleagues. Maybe it's not totally true, but at least based on the names and most of the affiliation, that, as I said, probably seems to be true. So based on looking at their papers, so they then extended the analysis to Australian football, rugby, and American football. And so what I think is important here is to focus on a high scoring game and not on a low scoring game. Yeah, because so James and I, we had a very short setup meeting yesterday to check if everything worked, and then we talked a little bit about whether football would be a good setup for this, and we probably very quickly agreed on that. Just this low scoring nature of football and the question that just one or two goals have a huge impact might not be the best setting for this. Yeah? And so then we might talk a little bit about other sports. So rugby, I don't know whether it's a high scoring, but it's definitely not a low scoring game. With American football, I see a little bit of a kind of difficulty with respect to the point system, because if we look at scoring actions, then maybe American football could be seen a little bit like an intermediate scoring game, but I think also with respect to the method which will be applied to the regression discontinuity design, that of course it would be better to analyze high-scoring games. And so in this sense, then I've decided that, first of all, of course, basketball, as it has been done in the original study, is, of course, very well suited for this. And then, as I already mentioned, also because of my personal interest and love to the game of handball, this, of course, also can be seen as a high-scoring game. So in a typical handball game of let's say in a typical first division, top tier handball would be something between 60 and 80 scores for accumulated over both of the teams. So results maybe sometimes could be 50, so it could be something like around 25 to 25, but sometimes there are of course also scores where teams, or both teams, reach within the mid-30s to the whatever, sometimes 40 goals for the teams. And so in this sense, there are of course much more scoring actions than they are available, for example, in football/soccer. Yeah? So I think focusing on a high-scoring sport is kind of one of the key aspects. And then, of course, there's the focus on the halftime and the whole setup here in the study. So the halftime as the treatment, which then should give the athletes, the players, first of all, the possibility to reflect on the standing, on their position relative to the goal, and of course, also coaches can have a clearer impact on this because they can give feedback on the effort levels. And so, yeah, as I said, the halftime will be chosen as the treatment. As I said, the break in a way provides the chance for the players to be aware of the score, and of course, especially to reflect on this. Yeah, we can have also the possibility for the players, for the athletes, also to work on the teamwork with respect to their goal. And then there, I think, is an important point to discuss, and that's of course, so first of all, we can see that at least in NBA basketball, that we have quarters and quarter breaks, and of course a halftime, and as we will see also in a minute, both in basketball and in team handball, there are team timeouts. And of course, also within team timeouts, the coaches will give feedback, and of course, there we could argue that also that gives maybe a little bit more room for awareness and reflection with respect to the standing and the goal. Two arguments here, which kind of led to that also in the original paper, timeouts are not used as a treatment, and that's that they might not be exogenous. Yeah? So the coaches can decide on there are some restrictions, of course, on that with respect to the number of timeouts, and at least in the NBA, if I'm not mistaken, there is something like a mandatory or the rules for mandatory timeouts. In handball, there are also a few rules on the maximum number of timeouts per halftime. But the important point, and there are some rules, I think, especially also in basketball and in team handball, which in a way limit the number of timeouts at the end of a game. But nonetheless, there's the possibility for timeouts, and as it might be obvious. So this might not be an exogenous break and treatment, and so that's why timeouts are not considered. The next aspect might just be a practical one that I'm not so sure that the data would be broadly available to figure out when the timeouts have been called. So some very basics with respect to the structure of the games, So if we look at basketball, especially NBA basketball, then we have 4 quarters per 12 minutes. There's a 15-minute halftime, and the coaches have the ability to call up to 7 team timeouts. So in team handball, we have 2 halftimes per 30 minutes each. So the official rules state that the halftime should be between 10 to maximum 15 minutes. And there are up to 3 team timeouts. Maximum amount of timeouts per halftime would be 2. And then there is some restriction within the last couple of minutes of the game. In the original Berger and Pope study, and also in the second study, the quarter breaks also have been analyzed. They have shown to be not as kind of important or significant in some instances, like the halftime breaks. And so far, I have just focused on the halftime and not on the quarter breaks. But on the other hand, this is not the most difficult thing to implement at one point. Yeah, so as I've mentioned, the design is a regression discontinuity design for the study, where we have the halftime, so the feedback that the team is losing as at the treatment, and the forcing variable will be the score difference at halftime. So since, of course, we have a home and away team, or at least 2 teams in a game, there is the question, like quite often in this form of analysis, how do we take care of the effects that of course the same game is in the data set 2 times? And following the 2 other papers, I have also opted for going for a home team analysis. However, the results seem to be robust by running them. At least I've done a couple of the regressions and studies, also from the perspective of the away team, and the results seem to be robust in this area. Okay, so for the NBA, the data that I have scraped is starting with the 1993 season or 93-94 season up to the most recent finished seasons, the 2020-21 season. That I think, including the playoff games, ended up to at least the available data. But I'm relatively confident that is almost a complete data set of 33,000 games. Of course, there has been the lockout season, which then was it 50 games per team instead of 82. So this is the full sample, and also in the light of having at least a little bit of a replication study, I've also focused on the original Berger and Pope's sample, which runs from the first games of the 93-94 season to March 1st of 2009, and so their data set consisted of 18,060 games. Both the second paper in this area and my study were not able to completely come up with 18,060 games. So I think my sample would be 18,320. So it's roughly the same thing. They have collected the data 10 years ago. So of course, and the paper itself was not as clear on if some games were missing and for the reason for this. But I think it's fair to assume that that this is more or less the same sample. And so if we then run a regression discontinuity design, this is conducted by means of the rdplot command in Stata, where the forcing variable is the score differential, and like in the original paper, the analysis have been limited to score differentials of minus and plus 10 in the league there. I think the largest score differential was something like 35 points in this whole data set. And of course, the idea is, again, diminishing sensitivity. Once I'm too far away from the goal, then of course there are no effort effects to be expected. And what we in this this is the very basic version of this. So the lines are second degree polynomial fit. The overall story does not look much different by going to a little bit higher order polynomials. But again, since the Berg and Pope study used the second degree polynomials, that's what I opted here too. This is a study with a setup, and also on the of course have the point estimates on the next slide, and those are the basic models without any covariates. However, as in the original paper, at least the winning percentage of the teams has been used, and results are almost identical. So there's no difference by including them. And I think it's quite interesting what we can see here, and what we also will see on the tables on the next slide, is that first of all, also, and maybe I should have even copied the original graph from the Berg and Pope paper, so the graph and also the point estimates are, although the setup is slightly different, is with the point estimates. But here it's almost a perfect replication of the original study. So again, not that I have assumed something different, but I think it's nice to see that that this was roughly, let's say, with 99.9% of the data set, of course, it could be replicated. And then, of course, this is the interesting thing is that, first of all, as I said, that of course it's interesting to see if we can extend this to other high-scoring sports. Hello?
Sí, ¿quién eres, Manu, no? Espera, es que igual me...
Okay, I think I will just go on, yeah?
Yeah, just carry on, Arne.
Okay, perfect. So that, of course, one of the first things to test here would be just to see how has the kind of the NBA, or how does it look for the NBA if we go beyond the Berg and Pope sample. So what I've done, what you will see on the right side panel is then the in a way out of Berg and Pope sample regression discontinuity design, starting with March 2009 until the end of the last season. And so maybe also important to say, and I forgot to say this, so first of all, of course, it's only regular season games. and the games which have a higher scoring differential than minus or plus 10 are excluded. And so what's kind of interesting, if we see on the left panel that we have a quite pronounced jump at the treatment, and also we will see that the point estimates are significant, at least at the 5% level. And if we then look at the out of sample study, that here we see a much smaller effect, and as we will see as the point estimates even insignificant. So that's, I think, quite interesting. Of course, I've also looked at the full sample in the sense of the sample period from the beginning of the 93-94 season to the end of the 2021 season, and here we still can see a little bit more visible jump at the discontinuity, and if we here again look at the point estimates, then it's just weakly significant. So I think that is kind of an interesting results in itself, that we of course can say, okay, we have a quite significant effect in the original study. If we look at the time period afterwards, the effect has been reduced to an insignificant amount, and if we look at the overall period, then the effect is only can be seen as a weak effect, and of course that's something which I have on my list to run a couple of more robustness checks, maybe look for other sub-time periods, maybe getting a little bit more data prior to the 93-94 season, which at least for some seasons should still be possible. Because there's always a little bit the one of the limiting factors here is the data availability, and the difficult aspect of this, of course, is the halftime result. Yeah, so it's neither in NBA basketball or in whatever in the NCAA or other basketball leagues or in team handball leagues, difficult to find full-time results way back. But I figured out that finding especially a quite reliable source, and then a source also which includes more than just one of the leagues, that is relatively difficult to get hold of halftime results way back, as we can see for handball. So it has been quite difficult to find halftime results prior to, let's say, 2004 or 5-ish, or something like that. Yeah. So, but at least that's, I think, something I have in mind to see a little bit more how robust are those results, and then of course maybe to think about whether this what might be the reason for this. Can we come up with a theoretical explanation why this might have changed? So as I said, if we look at the point estimates from the RD robust command in Stata, then we can see that for the Berger and Pope sample, we have a significant effect of this, also roundabout in the ballpark they have mentioned in the paper, where they gave something like 5 to 8.5% effect. However, if we extend this to the non-Berger and Pope sample, as I've already mentioned a couple of times, the effect will become insignificant. And for the full sample, it's just weakly significant. And as you can see, the number of games, of course, has been reduced because the games with more than 10, with a score differential of more than 10 on both sides have been eliminated. So if we look at team handball, as I said, the bottleneck with respect to the data collection actually were the halftime results. You can see that the data availability started between the 04-05 season for Germany and the 11-12 season for Denmark. So far, this has been a consistent data source, which is kind of odds portal. I think a database which many of us have used, of course, mainly with respect to receiving betting odds, but of course they also have the results and halftime results. And I think the same. It looks like there's the same database is used for a lot of web pages, like whatever live scores and others. Yeah, and so these 4 leagues, and I have scraped more data than just those 4 leagues, and this, of course, then is a task for the upcoming time to incorporate them. However, I think it's fair to say that those 4 leagues are among the top handball nations in Europe, and that's of course means in the world, with the biggest leagues and of course also the quite successful national teams. So especially Denmark has been very, very successful in the last 10 years, both on the level of European and World Championships, but also Olympic Games, winning a couple of times, and of course also winning a couple of medals. Other leagues who would also be quite important would then include leagues like Hungary and Poland, and probably Norway and Sweden, where, with respect to the overall commercial aspect and the number of spectators, of course, we talk about lower numbers. So I think in the bigger leagues, with some exceptions, of course, but we talk about something like 5,000 to 10,000 in attendance. However, for many of the clubs, I think it would be true to say that they have kind of arenas which normally are appropriate with respect to the size, and so that's I think why the selection of those 4 leagues for now. Of course, as probably many of you know, as a German and a researcher working at the Danish University, of course those 2 countries are close to my heart. And so the storyline so far for team handball is quite easy to and fast to tell, because so far there has been no significant effect in, first of all, this baseline model, but also so far and none of the models where some covariates have been included. Yeah, and so that's then already the time to come to the conclusion and the outlook. So, as a summary, first of all, I think it's fair to say that the Berg and Pope results could be replicated in the study with almost probably identical data set, and it's interesting, I think, to look at that the results outside of the sample period, then the effect was become insignificant. That there still is this weak significant effect for the overall period. And overall, we have insignificant effects for European team handball. And so what are the further ideas to finish this? So first of all, as I've mentioned, I would like to include some additional handball leagues. Then, of course, also, and that was somewhat more kind of challenging, or at least I need more efforts to scrape the NCAA data, because that's part of the original paper. And of course, then in the sense of replicating their results, I think it's just fair to to also look at NCAA. And then I don't know whether it's still in this paper, probably, but of course there could be just a hypothesis that we can look at different groups and see whether, of course, different group of people react differently to feedback and the possibility for feedback. And of course, one first could be looking at a difference between male and female handball. But of course, another aspect could be looking for or test for differences between, or not just handball, could also be basketball, of course, and then amateur and professional handball. Because there are at least the hypothesis could be that the less professional the sport is, maybe the less pronounced the feedback is, and so on. So that could be something which could be also a fun exercise to extend this area of research. And then finally, as I've said, there's still, of course, some robustness checks to be done. Yeah, so that's it from my side. Thanks first of all for your attention, and I'm looking forward to comments and questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Arne. That's a really interesting talk. There's a couple of questions in the chat which I'll look to you first, then we can open up the floor. So Sarah says, in response to, I think, your point about rugby, she says that rugby can be seen as a high-scoring game, but in a game like rugby union, there are certain situations, such as on very windy days, at which end you're playing from matters a lot, and you have an advantage one half, a disadvantage in another half. And I guess in your context, it's indoor sports. You don't have quite that same impact that the conditions might have in outdoor sports, perhaps.
No, it's an indoor sports, and so I don't think that there are so many influential factors like that.
Yeah. And then Alex says, one issue with the RDD approach is the choice of the bandwidth. The paper has plus minus 10 points, which seems rather large. Have you estimated the effects of other bandwidths? And what is the choice in handball, he asks.
The choice in handball was, and of course, I think was 7 or something like that. So slightly lower, because because in basketball, of course, we have the number of points, and in handball we just count the scores.
Alex, he had a little facial expression in reaction to that. I don't know if you wanted to follow up, Alex.
Oh, my camera was on. Well, 7, it also seems 7. It's like plus 14 in basketball, so it seems to be a bit large.
Yeah,
I would say, but again, I am far away of being expert in handball. But given that in basketball each basket is on average 2 points, here we have like only 1 goal, so it's kind of 14 points. But you can play around with different bandwidths, and
yeah, that's a good idea.
The sensitivity of results, because the one criticism towards this Berger and Pope paper was that it's plus minus. Once I presented it in St. Gallen in front of econometricians, and they just, the guys.
Yeah, but that happens probably to everyone who presents there.
Probably.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Tim's got a question. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks, Arne, for your presentation. Very interesting. I was wondering whether it's possible to disentangle a kind of moderating effect with regard to stakes. There is this paper, I don't know if I pronounce the names right, Genakos and Pagliero, I came across in JPE, and they found out that there's a kind of effect which goes in the opposite direction when you are close behind, which is then, at least if something is at stake, that choking under pressure becomes relevant. And so if that would downward bias your results in general, so maybe you will not find at the end an effect which you would expect just because of this incident. So if there is a possibility to disentangle the different stakes, so for example, with regard to where you are in the season or where you are, let's say, ranked in the table, then eventually you are able to disentangle that effect. So they did it in weightlifting, completely different setting. But I was wondering whether that is somehow confounding your results at the moment.
Yeah, I have to look into that. So, but it's a really good point.
Thanks,
let me just add to Tim's comment that weightlifting was published in the Journal of Political Economy. So we see that really big journals, they are interested in sports-related data.
Thanks, Alex, too. Jean-Louis, raise his hand up. Do you want to go ahead, Jean-Louis? Can't hear you. I can see your microphone is not muted, but I can't hear you. Can't hear you, Jean-Louis. And maybe if your microphone isn't working, you could type your question. So I can't hear you. Maybe you can type your question in the chat. Perhaps while we wait for Jean-Louis' question in the chat.
In the meantime, if I'm allowed, I would like also to thank Arne for raising a very important issue of replication studies. That's really important. And in fact, recently editors and journals, they are happy to publish those papers. And we had with Tim and Felix, we had a discussion in our ski jumping paper where we also replicated the previous study. So in fact, really many editors recently, they started to appreciate replication studies, which may open which may have a very nice stage for additional studies on previous findings.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thomas has got his hand up.
Yeah, just a very brief point to clarify that the guys that you were referring to are indeed Dutch. So there's indeed 3 Dutch people. So
yeah, one of them is at a UK university, and so
and now the other one, Bauken, is at Yale, but they are indeed. So there's no problem calling them Dutch. They won't be offended.
But you know, sometimes if you look at those names, it easily can be Belgium.
That would be very offensive indeed. But in this case, no. But they presented that paper at Erasmus, so they're from Amsterdam.
Okay, very good. Thanks. And I tried not to butcher their names, so
that's okay.
Thanks, Thomas. Any more questions and comments? I guess if you're taking the data from odds portal, Arne, you don't get any information on the coach or who was coaching any of the teams, because I always imagine, I always use football as my example, but you always imagine that better coach can do the team talks and motivate the players, etc. And they may have a more of an effect, so kind of a fixed effects coaches kind of thing. But you probably don't have that information, I guess.
No, it's probably, as you know, it's a very kind of stripped down information you get on that page, and of course, so for football, there might be more sources where you can kind of merge these informations to with handball, and then some of the leagues that might be more difficult. But you're right, and of course that's something which also is discussed, I think, at least in the Dutch paper, and that was also why I was thinking about maybe looking at different tiers, so professional and maybe more amateur sports, where we could maybe argue that the feedback generated by the coaches might not be as good as it will be at the top level.
Yeah. Jean-Louis, do you want to try again with your question?
Do you hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm just wondering whether it could be possible to compute the probability of winning the game as a function of the number of points behind. Not just 10 points, but as a function of the number of points behind. So you can see as a continuous variation. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that case, you could see if there is some jump at a given number of points or not, or if there's an area. You see what I mean? More as a continuous variation as compared to a jump at 10 points.
Yeah. I will have a look into that. Very good point.
Okay, thanks, Jean-Louis, and thanks for persisting with the technology. Any more questions and comments? Okay, well, it looks like that's a no, in which case, thank you very much, Arne. Really interesting talk, and debuting both Denmark as a location for a talk in the Roses series, and handball as a sport in the Reading Online Sport Economics series. So thank you for both of those, and we will take a break for the weekend, and we'll return again next week. In the next 2 weeks, Georgios Nalbantis has told me that we need to rename the Roses and replace the R with a T, because we're in Tübingen for the next 2 weeks. So next week on November the 5th, we have Lucas Fischer from Tübingen presenting modeling behavioral responses to emotional cues in sport, Bayesian approach. And the following week, Georgios will present his paper on causal effects of marketing events. So please do tune in the next 2 weeks. Please do bear in mind, if you're joining us from North America next Friday, that it may be an hour different, given that here in the UK our clocks will change back to non-summertime or daylight savings times. So please do take care if you're joining us next week from North America. But with no further delay, thank you very much again, Arne, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me.